Welcome to Not Stopping for Directions, a podcast for and about dads, especially those parenting children with behavioral health challenges. I'm your host, Michael Carmen, and this podcast is brought to you by the Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children. The content included should not take the place of clinical or medical advice and are purely points of discussion for you to consider during your parenting journey. Hello, welcome to Not Stopping for Directions. This is our sixth podcast. We're very happy to have David Cozart of the Lexington Leadership Council's Fatherhood Initiative joining us today. David, I want to welcome you. I will say we've had a heck of a time coordinating our schedules, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I know we've both been particularly busy these last few weeks. So, David, tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Fatherhood Initiative, if you will.
Sure. So, thanks for having me, Michael. And let me tell those listening that the coordination was more my side than Brother Carmen. So we had some time scheduled and I got preoccupied.
No
Thank
worries.
you for your patience and tolerance, for I feel like this subject matter is so critical for children and families and parents. And so I may have listed them in particular order because that's when I do fatherhood, it's really a children's program and it's really a program, and it's through the portal of the father. So yeah, man, again, David Cozart, it's the Lexington Leadership Foundation and Fatherhood Initiative. The Lexington Leadership Foundation is a faith-based organization that is trying to tackle the toughest issues in the city. So it's actually restore, equip, and deploy people of goodwill and faith to do just that, tackle those issues.
Gotcha.
So fatherhood is among four other ministries of the Leadership Foundation. Also, it looks like one hat, but it's multiple hats. And I am the CVO, I like to call it, the Chief Visionary Officer.
Nice.
For the emerging organization of the Commonwealth Center for Fathers and Families, which is a 501c3 that seeks to propagate responsible fatherhood or replicate and spread responsible fatherhood engagement across the Commonwealth because of the things it does for children and families and parents.
Understood. So that initiative is more of a statewide push, whereas the initiative through the Lexington Leadership Council Foundation, that's more specific to just the Fayette County area? Is that accurate?
Correct. The Lexington Leadership Foundation Fatherhood Initiative in Fayette County, Lexington. Now, we do hit some of the contiguous counties, and we do have folks take advantage of our program because of the scarcity of fatherhood programs. We do have folks take advantage of our program as far as Pike County in times past.
So how do they come? How does a dad come to be engaged with that program? How do they land with you, so to speak?
Yeah, here at the Leadership Foundation Fatherhood, and we primarily work through referrals. Oftentimes there are referrals through the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, or DCBS, at the local level. If a father or a family are known to the Cabinet because of the or substantiation of abuse or neglect, oftentimes parenting programs are one of the things that them back on track and work their reunification plan. So we get referrals from there. We work with men from family court, work with folks that are engaged with child support. We work with folks that are engaged with drug court. And we also work with men in the community at large. Very careful to let folks know that fatherhood skills, you've had several podcasts that somebody said that babies don't come with instruction manuals, right?
No doubt.
And so fatherhood program teaches one to be the best father they can be and want to be. Is useful for anybody. So there's no certain race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, or life circumstances that qualify or disqualify you being a part of the Fatherhood Initiative.
Gotcha. So in some instances, these men are compelled to be with you or ordered to be with you. And in others, it's just somebody that's feeling like, oh boy, I could really use some help. I'm going to check this out. What's that dynamic like in the room? And is it in person, or are you all doing this on Zoom? What's that like?
So yeah, so we're back to in person, which is a good
Great.
right. I hope y'all hang on in this Zoom box, because I know y'all been out there in one for the last 3 years. So hang out, because some good stuff going on with Brother Michael. But yeah, you said held. Sometimes we call it voluntold or recommended.
Right. Right.
We don't like to be ordered, quite frankly, because there are certain ones of us that have that oppositional defiant strain in us, and in order to do anything, we'll do just not that.
Right.
Plus, if someone does it under their own choosing, you're more likely, have buy-in, invest, commit to do it. It is a free program, so the real payment is your commitment, free to the participant. So the commitment, in essence, is your payment.
Gotcha. So this podcast came to be many, many years ago, I guess over a decade now. I used to work for an organization called the Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children, which is based down in Frankfort, Kentucky. And they are a family organization that works with parents who are parenting children that may have behavioral health struggles. And then they do peer support with those parents and other programming. Train them to be advocates. They also work with transitional age youth who have gone through systems and had behavioral health issues and are now kind of banding together to learn from each other and also advocate for themselves. And so I worked there about 10 years ago, and we tried to kind of push some fatherhood programs out there. We did a fatherhood retreat that I don't know, 6 to 10 dads went on, and it was very impactful. But I think, I've moved on since then, but they contacted me recently, really wanting to get outreach to fathers going again, because I think what they find is moms will show up looking for resources and help and are more socialized for talking about feelings and talking about struggles. And sometimes men are, that's not something I do. I'm not comfortable talking about that. So we've tried different ways to engage with dads online. We tried to do some support groups that were virtual with mixed results. But I'm curious, I like to ask this question of other folks that are kind of in the business of corralling dads together. What works? What works for you to really get that buy-in and participation where they break through that reticence to talk about things that are struggles and difficulties and challenges and feelings? What works for you?
Yeah. Let me do the quintessential wrong answer by answering your question with a question to you.
Sure.
Michael, why don't you go to KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, to get a hamburger? The best hamburger.
Because that's not what they do.
Well, why don't you go to the dollar store and get, oil filter?
That's not the place to do it.
Not the place to do it. They might have a filter, but they don't specialize in it.
Right.
Advanced Auto specializes in filters.
Right.
Burger King specializes in burgers. So you're more likely to get that. This conundrum of men not coming, I think it has to do with, historically, from the experiences of men and fathers. If we go to our historical, traditional human service agencies, they really have not done. And if they happen to be doing it that day, that week, that month, that project,
Right.
It's a one offer, and it's not their primary work, and they have not fully optimized and mastered that skill.
Sure.
And so I think what works is the same thing really in any other formula. That's authenticity and consistency and quality and commitment to do that work over a period of time.
Gotcha.
Now you have somewhere doing the work, and it doesn't have to be the Lexington Leadership Fatherhood Initiative. It could be, case in point, here in Lexington, the Center for Women, Children, and Families, that after a partnership with us several years ago, grafted that into their parenting and work. Now they continuously do it. So if we have class overflow, we send them to the next fatherhood programs.
Right.
And if they have class overflow, they refer back to us.
Nice.
But they've been now for 3 years consistently. That works. And then those same characteristics of authenticity, consistency, and
Right.
accessibility.
Well, let's go a little deeper on this, because it's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I do think there's a shift in parenting maybe that exists now for the kids coming up now. But you have some gray hair. I have a little bit of gray hair going here. My experience, my experience is hearkening back to when I was a kid was, boys were parented a certain way where, you weren't supposed to be afraid. If you got hurt, you dusted yourself off and you went on. All that to say, I think we're programmed or taught, that when I'm a man, this is what I do and don't do when it comes to talking about feelings or having feelings, even because some feelings are off limits, right? Fear or tearfulness or what have you. So how do you you get them to the room, because you're Burger King and you got the burgers, you get them in the room. How do you really break through those layers of teaching that I don't do this isn't who I am, this isn't what I do, and really cut through and get to those feelings that are certainly there?
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate that question. It's a commonly asked one, but I think it's under that common misconception that men will not share, that men will not open up, or not supposed to share, or are not supposed to open up. There's a brother, he may be in Philly, I'm not sure, but Jason Wilson, he's pretty heavy in the field of violence prevention, youth development, male improvement, and fatherhood some as well. He has a book that's called Cry Like a Man, and I really like that.
Yeah.
And he is pushing the sentiment of men expressing themselves. But when they get in the room, it doesn't always break immediately, because they're doing, anyone does, not just a man, but a woman also, that is cognizant. They're feeling, seeking to find out if this space is safe and authentic, as I've used that word times, right? And once that occurs, once they get over the being voluntold and mandated, they see the space is safe, then things start to occur. And that harkens back to a question that I didn't fully answer. What do you do when you get these men of different referral sources and different origins in the same space? What's that dynamic? You also start to realize, oh, this brother from drug court is dealing with communication issues, the mother of his child, the same as I'm dealing with communication and issues around whether my son should play tackle football or not with my wife. Or this teacher or this minister in the church that's in this group, or this deacon from a church that's in the group, me, who is a returning citizen in family court, also has to deal with the frustrations of not being called to the or the parent teacher conference. And he's a deacon in a church.
Right.
And so you start seeing that we're more alike than different, like anything. And I think that happens with fathers, race, socioeconomic, geography. When we get in the space and start sharing and we see the authenticity, we start being able to see that we've got a lot more in common, regardless of race, skin color, ethnicity. income, educational background, all that, then we have different.
Well, I will say that aligns with my experience thinking back again to when I worked for KPFC, and that is you would find when you got in the same room with folks who were, again, facing some real challenges with their children and struggles, to use a phrase that was used in the recent political bouts that just went on, from the hood to the holler, we would see the same issues and experiences, right? I mean, there is kind of this commonality to struggle that cuts across wherever you're from and wherever you came from and whatever, it just cuts across all of that. So I appreciate you saying that, and it certainly aligns with kind of how I experienced that very specific group. Let me ask you, David, were there experiences that led you to this work, life experiences that kind of pointed you in this direction? What made you land in a fatherhood initiative?
Yeah. Well, I've got a story. I've got 3 children of my own, 24 and 19. And so obviously that compels me. But that wasn't until later. I've always been human services, and my mother and father were married and in my life. They're both deceased now. Were collected at a pretty early age, 65 and 66. I was 30, in my late 30s when that occurred. But good people taught me those parental principles. My dad was there, great man. But I'm really not in earnest doing it for daddy and mama. When I went into human services, everywhere, regardless of the service population, I was able to see a common denominator, or frequently common denominator or characteristic. I worked at a Job Corps center, about a college opportunity youth ages 16 to 24 or 16 to 22, from New York, Chicago, Florida, Virgin Islands. Many of those young men, many of those young women came from homes that were complete, in my estimation, absent of a father. I came to Lexington, worked at teen mother home here, Florence Crittenden home, back in the late 90s. Late 90s. Young women having babies. The fathers of those children were not engaged in most case planning of the young ladies or women that were there. Their fathers themselves, had they been in their life in a healthy way, often absent. Went from there to work at another facility to work with young ladies. No fathers in their lives, the fathers of their children not in their lives. Went to work broader, the community organizing arena. I worked to increase service delivery capacity, neighborhood-based level. I'm looking at neighborhoods, I'm looking at households. Father absence is prominent. Went to another job, father absence. And by that time, I'm like, hey, I got to put a fatherhood component where I go. So some 2.5 decades ago, if you got me, they know you had this appendage and this tag on of fatherhood, regardless of what I was doing, community development or otherwise. Then I came to do the work in earnest because I started seeing it as a root cause issue.
Right.
The root cause issue, and if we can address that, we're exponentially impacting things, including maltreatment reduction and the staving off of generational father absence in homes.
So you're really changing lives with this program. I'm curious, has the work, as you've gotten deeper and deeper in it, changed you, or how has it changed your life?
Yeah, it reminds some days, unfortunately, Michael, of how horrendous of a father I am in some moments. I just got through talking to a group of men about eccentric the positive and not accentuating the negative. 3 positives to 1 negative. And then my daughter gets in the car after a basketball game and she scored 27 points and held her, and got 4 steals. And then I asked, yeah, but how many did your man, Yeah. And I'm like, oh,
I
that's
feel
not
that.
the way to do
Yeah.
it, Daddy.
Yeah. David,
Man,
I
I'd
think,
say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
right.
I'm going to talk about all the blocks my son did on the line, not the 2 I noticed he didn't,
Right. I
And so
feel
it
that.
obviously purges and purifies and continues to at times even convict you.
Right.
It's also what it's done to me. It's helped me to dig into, Michael, that I have been to this point in direct service delivery, and that there is some impact. I'm believing that perhaps through some things I've done, but more through sort of divine intervention and I would call God's direction. Some more things have happened and seeds have been planted. Hopefully some been planted under whose shade I will never even sit. But I've realized that at direct you can do a certain amount of work, a good amount of work. But now I realize that there are some systemic elements we need to start addressing that brings fathers in and grafts them into infrastructures of our institutions and systems, and that we have policies and practice procedures that are not counterintuitive to positive family development, which is the inclusion of the father, whether custodial or non-custodial.
Right. Very well put. Thank you. David, this is a question I've asked on at least one other podcast, maybe a couple now, but definitely something I'm pondering myself. Do you think it's getting easier or more difficult to be a father, just in our society?
Oh, it was never easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. I think there is certainly an evolution and of our children and what they're facing, and their accessibility and their base of knowledge and their rate of maturation.
Certainly.
And as a consequence, parenting, teaching, forming, shaping, and directing our youth, which is the primary responsibility of parents, mothers, and fathers. And as such, I think I would lean towards parenting or fatherhood being even more difficult. And when we get some of those sensitive areas of family definition and the constellations families are evolving to be, and I'm all for extended family and different, and family can be and is iterative, right? And it's defined differently in different cultures and by different people with different ways of thinking. Even with that, the fatherhood element is becoming more difficult because in some cases it's actually it's erased or relegated, and I believe that when a child, and here's where I land on all of it, when a child, because it's always the focal point is on the child and creating the best environment for this child to have successful and positive life outcomes that all of us want for our children and likely all children. When it comes to that child, I think it's inarguable to say, or I don't think we can argue that when a child has 2 healthy parents, a father, it increases their chances of positive, successful in life outcomes. And I just can't argue that. I don't. Nobody can argue that, and that's where I land my feet. But it ain't easy. It ain't easy, mama. It ain't easy for daddy. And I think it's probably getting more difficult because of, probably things that you've heard, but that maturation rate and accessibility and exposure of our children is just expediting and accentuating the issues. Our biggest issue was, whether we could turn the faucet on outside and get it out of the hose. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I will say, something you're hitting at there in terms of access. When I was a kid, if you wanted to learn about something, you were going to hop on your bike and you were going to pedal to the library and you're going to go to the card catalog and you're going to flip through and find, and then so there was some effort involved. And now you're a click away from information, good or bad, right? And one click away. So I do think, from that standpoint, just it's you want to have an influence on your child, and your child is in the world. And even in years gone by, your child was away at school and gone most of the waking day, and being influenced by the world out there. So I think there's always been that struggle of wanting to steer kids in a positive direction. But again, it's just that instant access to a whole world of information, some of which is great and some of which is pretty shady. So I do think from that standpoint, things have only become more challenging. But David, this has been fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you carving out some time for us. Tell folks how they can get in touch with your program.
Yeah, so the Lexington Leadership Foundation Fatherhood Initiative that is here in Fayette County, you can look us up on lexflexlf.org. And for the exciting and emerging organization that is the Commonwealth Center for Mothers and Families, you can find us there at ccffky.org. And that organization that you worked with in the past that's recently reached for fatherhood elements, that's the very thing that the Commonwealth Center wants to do. Direct service provision as much as we are technical assistance in enlisting or planting fatherhood programs across the state, or enhancing those folks that are aiming to do that now. And so we'd love to hear from them.
Excellent. Well, I will definitely get that in front of them. And David, I want to thank you again for your time. I'm going to let you go and do that good work that you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you, my brother. Blessings to you and your work.
All righty. Thanks, David.